George Bernard Shaw said, "You imagine what you desire, you will what you imagine, and at last you create what you will." Creations need material inputs, and without availability and diversity of resources, we will lose the freedom to manifest our imagination. Imagination and creativity have been valuable partners to human existence. They have allowed us to survive by manipulating our environment, but this partnership is now revealing its very high price: environmental degradation. It is likely we can't reverse the damage, but we certainly have the creativity to make the change that will stop us from inflicting further damage. We just need to create a desire to do so. By the end of this century, there will be some 10 billion lives dependent on tragically reduced resources in unusual climate conditions. We will have to focus on providing for fundamental needs such as nutrition. At present, food production contributes up to 25% of greenhouse gas emissions and is therefore a good candidate area for change in behavior. The modern capitalist mode of food production and distribution has made it possible for increasingly more people to be fed. On the other hand, however, food production, processing, and consumption comprise a long chain of environmentally damaging activities. Every process of the food supply chain, from clearing land to distribution and commercial storage, contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. In Britain, for example, the fossil fuel energy required to produce, process, and distribute the average person's annual food intake is about 6 times greater than the energy content of the food itself. In the Western world, the notion of achievement locks people into dynamic lifestyles so that the demands of jobs and education make it impossible or very difficult to maintain a diet that has little environmental impact and that is conducive to good health. Such hectic lifestyles create demand for fast food. Fast food production is among the top 3 contributors of greenhouse gas emissions from breeding livestock and cutting forests to produce packaging, according to a 2006 report by the UN. In addition, the fast food supply chain relies on various chemicals, which are very damaging to the environment and to health. Capitalism has taken advantage of the fact that human beings have endless imagination and therefore have more and more desires to satisfy. Moreover, the concept of economic welfare and growth do not allow governments to adopt sustainable practices, although Al Gore would say that the two are not incompatible. The social problem of the tragedy of the commons means that a top-down behavioral change strategy that has environmental health at its core just won't work on its own. The environmental externalities that result from food production, processing, and distribution are simply not tangible for the individual, and he cannot appreciate his own footprint in isolation. Now, the tragedy of the commons tells us that each individual in a given community acts according to his own economic interest. What this means in relation to reducing emissions from food is that each person needs to be convinced in the benefit they will personally gain from eating sustainably produced foods. This means that emphasizing the environmental impact of our diet simply won't result in a change of a scale that will make a significant difference, because, as this bar chart and the next one will show, people are more likely to be thoughtful about their health than about the environment. A study by the IFIC in 2009 shows that concerns about environmental impact of food-producing methods are at the lower end. But just look at the extent to which people are concerned about obesity. The study has also found that favorability toward processed foods is lowest among the wealthiest and most highly educated. This should perhaps not be that surprising. It simply may be too much to ask of a worker in full-time employment with several children to raise and a mortgage to pay to also think of and act on what kind of legacy their lifestyle is leaving behind that will play up in 50 to 100 years from now. This is better left to policymakers. Furthermore, lower footprint foods are simply more expensive to produce, and the perceived benefit from them is apparently not enough for people to convince them to pay the higher price for green food. Agrochemical agriculture is heavily subsidized by the taxpayer through the government, whereas organic farming receives no subsidies at all. This is ludicrous and absolutely inefficient, considering two things. First, the subsidies that have been used to support intensive farming have been promoting for the last 40 years a huge surplus in production that just goes to waste. And second, intensive farming has hidden costs. In the UK, for example, government spends £2.3 billion of taxpayer money every year to clean up the environment from agricultural chemicals. Now, to summarize, people may be aware of the environmental impact their diet leaves, but the way society functions gives little opportunities for access to lower footprint foods. The choice between organic and fast food is not a choice between two equal alternatives. It is then in the hands of governments to lead the way by channeling subsidies into organic food production and sustainable distribution chains, and by fostering dietary behavior that has human health at its core. These two factors, economic cost and personal benefit, are two very strong drivers of behavioral change. Imagination and creativity may have been our partners in damaging our planet, but going further from here means an even stronger partnership. A painter needs a brush and a canvas to be able to paint.